So in this video we are going to actually summarize the basic authentication, that how it actually works. Okay, a little bit of it. So first of all, let me just run the code. Okay, so once the code is completed, then we can actually dig into this thing. So code has ran fine. So let me just hit the let me just uh, I mean, if we actually, if I try to hit this endpoint, like get all the task, that is actually in the task controller, get all task. So for this I have to actually implement basic authentication that I have implemented, and without, if I don't pass the basic auth, so this endpoint will never bring any result. And so you can actually see from here security config that this thing, like anything that is here, it has to be a user role. So okay, it should be authenticated. So let's just see, I mean, from where the process starts. Okay, so there is a method that is called authentication manager. Authentication manager, yes. Let me just write it again. Authentication manager, so it's an interface. Okay, let me just close the remaining one. Okay, and so that we should have only one. Okay, so its method authentication is called, and it has actually, this is the interface, and it has 5 implementation. So we will choose the implementation that is called provider manager. So process starts from authentication manager and then it goes to the provider manager. This is an interface and it's an implementation. You can see it's implementing authentication manager. Okay, and so its method authentication will be called, because authentication will calls, then it method authentication will call, this method will call. And here you can see that is actually get to list all the providers, so there can be many providers. And and it will try to find the right provider. So let's just put the debugger here. Okay, one debug point is here. So which will be called, so it actually called abstract user detail authentication pro. So there are many providers. So in our case it's called abstract user detail authentication provider. Okay, authentication manager, provider manager, and then is abstract user detail authentication provider. So if you can see here, I mean, once it actually provide the providers, it tried to iterate on each of the provider, and if you find that the provider is actually right, then it call the each that provider method authentication. So let's just come to the method authentication of this provider, and let's just have a debugger here. Okay, so uh, and here you can see that it actually, I mean, doing multiple things and doing multiple things. And it has determine user create, so means there are many methods of it. And one of the methods that is actually calls, like, this is authentication where it actually call additional check. Okay, so if we go to the additional check, you can see this is additional check. So this method is an additional check, authenticate. So this method has no, I mean, it is implemented somewhere else, because so let's just try to search it. So it is called on multiple places, but this method has no definition inside it. So let's just try to open one more method that is called DAO authentication provider. So that is DAO authentication provider, and you can see authenticate additional check is implemented here, and it is actually extending abstract user detail authentication provider. And here you can see that it has user detail service and password service. So, and it has encoder service. So if you can see, basically we also implemented our user detail service, and the reason was that because so that DAO authentication provider can use our service, and it has actually load user by name that it use. We have implemented this thing, and if you actually go inside it, you can find out that it is actually try to get the password, and it is doing the same thing, like try to identify whether the password is right or not. So all these things will be done by it. We just have to implement this thing, like user detail service and the method of it, because when we implemented it, then we have to override this thing, and it has actually used this thing. And from the security config, if you see, so we actually turned our user detail service. Okay. uh, and another thing was, we actually identified authentication provider that you should use DAO authentication provider that you can see right here, and password encoder was this thing. So let me just try to hit the endpoint, and let's just see how the control flows. So let me just run it in the debugger mode. Okay. And so let's just close these two methods, two files. So this file, then this file, then this, then this. Okay, so this will go in this way. Let's just come to the provider manager. Here we have a debugger. Let's just hit it again. I'm hitting it from behind the scenes. So here we are have, so it is actually landed here. And if we try to step over, so at some point of time it has actually only one provider. If you can see, it has only one provider. So here now, after this thing, it has come to the authentication method, and it will try to it is still in the provider authentication. At this I mean, if I go further, so after this thing, like after this thing authentication, it comes here authenticate. Okay, so let's just go to the additional check. Okay, additional check, because I mean it there are many methods are, so here we are additional check, and let's just make sure that we have, okay, we have actually implemented. So additional check was there. Okay, so this was actually overview how the things are working. I'm just running it again because I just have to show you, I have to show you this thing, like what we have implemented actually basic, because of this scope. We implemented this thing. We can actually move this thing, like uh, move this thing to the config. Okay, and because these both of these things are so much related to each other, uh, let's just stop it. And okay, so this was the objective of this video. Let's further we will actually implement something different, like this is a basic auth. We will go to the JWT auth, uh, that is actually more secure.